We are back. I'm Aarnimetsa from Pokeramania.com, and today we are having public-private coaching with our member Neo1186. We are talking about some 9-max sit-and-goes and waiting if Neo is still alive on the other end.
Yeah, I'm still alive.
Okay, and we are trying to go through some of these hands that we are having like against opponents that we know. This is a bubble situation.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I'm thinking when I'm looking at this kind of a guy that's playing like 30%/11, and then I'm looking at your action here and I'm like, why? That's literally the first thought in my mind.
Well, I haven't had anything negative on him, like 2 loose calls or something like that. And this is a pretty strong ICM spot.
This is a pretty strong ICM spot, but if our opponent doesn't understand how strong of an ICM spot this is, like in general, if we are having these kind of an ICM spots, waiting for hold'em resources to start up, like if we are counting basic hand, let's have a full STT here, clear everything. There is like 324. It doesn't matter if it's not exact. Like usually these calculations, we don't need to stress that much about being completely exact. 4395, yeah, okay. And big blind and small blind are going to be slightly smaller, so 160 for big blind, 80 for small blind, and 20 as ante. Oh, antes are actually pretty big at that exact moment. But if we are looking at this spot, this is a very heavy ICM spot in the way that we can shove any 2 cards. But it's when our opponent calls only pocket 9s plus. And if we are having a random player, like this kind of a random player, I'm thinking that they are going to be slightly tighter in here. They probably like money as well as usual. But I don't like believe for a small moment that this kind of a guy would, like with ace king or ace queen, like would he be folding it ever? No. And it's quite likely that if we are having a guy that likes to play a lot of hands, I think that there is a risk that he's going to be calling way more than what's going to be profitable. And this is like a spot where also against a random player, like if we are having a random player here, that if we are thinking about like the break-even point is about 7.5%. So it's like if he only calls the range that you open from UTG that are really solid looking, you are losing money on King Dukes off. But in this case, like even though there is a ton of pressure, and even though this is wildly profitable against a guy that knows the ICM situation, it's also that if we are having a random player that's playing passively, I don't think that there's any point in risking over 30 big blinds here. And the most likely point is to abuse our opponent by limping or min raising.
The reason why I didn't min raise was because he didn't fold much to c-bets and that he defends a lot of his blinds.
You have 57 hands on him.
Yeah, I think I have.
It's likely that you are having like 1 fold to c-bet situation on him.
I think I had a bit more hands from earlier stages. Those are filtered for, I think, 3 to 500 or 3 to 600.
Yeah, I think that this is a spot that where we are still going to get enough folds if our basic plan is to start with a bet and carry on with another bet on the flop. I'm thinking that we are getting enough folds for sure, especially when it's going to be a big stack against big stack situation. And I'm thinking that in this case, like, we are making money if we shove compared to if we fold against most opponents here. But are we making the most money here? I don't think so. I think that we are making more money if we are against a random player that's not 3-betting a lot, if we are keeping the pot smaller. And yeah, there is like Danita has put on when we were in the break on like what is PokerStars policies in the age verification part, but it's like they are leaving open the possibility of confiscating the money, and it's going to be such a bad thing for them if underages are playing. Like, it's one of the key points in the license agreements with different countries that they don't allow underage players to be playing, so they need to be really vigilant on it. But it's funny in a way, because I think on PokerStars I have laughed that it's probably about the only software in the world where you can change your date of birth from your account. It's there for a reason, and I don't see any other reason for it being there is than to like legalize the accounts that have been opened underage. But I wouldn't have any, like, if there would be an account that I would have opened when I was too young, I would say that it's probably going to be quite risky, and it's going to always be a risk after that. But so this is, I think this is a prime example on when we could keep the pot smaller and keep the variance smaller.
Okay. If this would be a rec who plays back, would you then shove it?
We could shove, we could limp, we could min raise. Depends on the raid.
Okay.
Like, this stack size is also going to be so big that it will make really hard spots for our opponent as well to be 3-betting here. And I mean that this shove is plus EV despite horrible outcome. I'm not sure. Like, it becomes break even when opponent is calling like ace-10 suited, ace-jack off, pocket 8 plus. But I think this is going to be a spot where you are making more money by keeping the pot smaller.
Okay.
We can come back to these more abstract questions. Problematic preflop situations. I think that this one is quite simple. I'm thinking that against most players this is a shove.
You think?
Yeah.
And you think the stats here are also correct, that he opens that wide?
I think that your steal stats are like 47% here.
39 from cutoff.
But this is from button. Oh, this is from cutoff. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that this was like...
a bit bad, yeah.
Of course, like, this doesn't make any sense to 3-bet then. I thought that this was 3-handed. Oh my. Like, 3-handed, this is the easiest hand ever, like, just shove. But four-handed, this is hard. I'm thinking that this guy is probably going to be aggressive enough for this to be a good shove. And this is a hand that I would like to shove a lot when I'm playing this hand because the post-flop playability sucks. Like it truly, truly sucks. And we are out of position, so it's like it's a profitable flat call, but it's also going to be even against the against the tight range. It's not, because then it's going to be that our ace is going to be almost always dominant. But like against this kind of a guy, just shove it and be done with it.
Okay.
Excellent point for Calleon as well. Also, when we are limping our small blinds against opponents to give them a harder spot that where they can't have a good risk-reward ratio re-steal. On those spots as well, if they are raising a bit on us, then we can also limp shove some of our hands that we wanted to play. But this is something that actually, like if we are having 25% range that we are against here, then we are probably going to want to defend this by calling, because we are going to get such great odds. If we are having something like 15%, then we are just going to fold. And if we are having like 30% plus here, then I think that we are just going to shove it.
Okay.
But it depends a lot on his early stats. Okay, hand number 2. I think that this is something that this will also be a shove. I don't think that this is going, like, if we are looking at the player, we are looking like it's probably 3 to 5 handed or something like that, your filters.
Yeah, 3 to 6 handed.
That's quite wide.
Should I make it 3 to 5? Is this better?
It's always going to be that you should be looking at the different ranges. Like looking at how close of a range do I get, what kind of a sample sizes do I get on my opponents. And that should be the main point in. 3 to 6 isn't bad, because then all of the steal stats work really nicely. And it's going to make it a bit easier to do the previous stats, because I think also on Hold'em Manager the steal stats from early positions are not working as nicely as they should if you are having 9-handed and 6-handed hands in the same. Like UTG or early position and mid position are going to be widely different in 7-handed, 6-handed situations. Like might be that there is no early position in 7-handed, but there is early position on 6-handed, and the early position is a later position than early position that doesn't exist in 7-handed. And if that wasn't confusing, then just like go look on how the poker tracker or whatever does the. It gives you a headache on how they are doing this, how they are doing these positions, and there are some interesting spots. And RLUH said that fold big blind to steal. Is it included in your HUD? Neo can correct me, but I think this number is like fold versus steal. Fold big blind versus steal.
Yes, it's a green number behind the V.
And sorry, these HUD stats actually, I'll remove those because those are my general HUD stats. And now we are seeing Neo's HUD stats here. And Neo is using a different HUD than I am. But in this case, like ace-7, again, hand that completely sucks. Like I would be shoving practically every small ace here. I would be shoving also every pocket pair here. And if I'm thinking about what do I want to defend by calling, it would be mainly suited and connected type of hands, or hands that are going to be too weak to be shoved. There are some of those hands that are going to be too weak to be shoved, and also like if our opponent is opening 50%, I would be quite apt to also, like if we are having aces or kings here, we could just flat call them as well.
I have a pretty limited sample size of opponent, and at the table it was probably even lower at that point. Does that concern you with a hand like a7 off?
I'm going to be going mostly by categorizing my opponent on VPIP and PFR at that point, and this opponent is generally more aggressive than a general player. And Calleon said big pockets are nasty to flat sometimes as well. I just think that the extra equity is going to be worth it, and it will protect your weaker flat calling hands naturally. But like in here, we can see that like it doesn't matter would he open 50%, since this would be profitable even against 30%.
Yep.
Okay, hand number 3. So here on bubble, I'm in race steel versus reg, and the interesting thing is that many regs do this kind of small 3-bet to find out if I have a strong hand or not, and when I shove here, which I usually do with strong hands, they always hold a big part of their range, but I'm not so sure I want to call here with anything but aces. Any suggestions? Seems to be good 3-betting strategy by regs versus other regs on the bubble.
Yeah, it's better than a shove, I think, on his part.
Depends on his range and depends on what he thinks your range is going to be. Like when he's going for such a small raise, I'm thinking that if you are thinking that he's folding to a 3-bet a ton here, or folding to a 4-bet a ton here, then you shouldn't 4-bet. Like then you should be calling with queens and kings, and I think that's going to be what I would want to do here as well. Like if we are having something on pocket jacks, then we can pocket jacks, pocket tens, those we can shove. Then we don't care that much if our opponent is folding, because it's usually just better the more if our opponent is folding. But we don't want to fold out the crap here.
Even if we are out of position and with high bubble factor?
Our hand strength is so great that out of position is not going to be a big problem for us, I think.
Okay.
And of course, if we are flat calling this, then ace comes on the flop, and then you are saying to yourself that these stupid ace magnets are betraying me again.
Yeah.
But I think still it's going to be it opens to get 4-bet bluffed a lot if they do overly much of these small 3-bets. I think that I haven't seen that much of these small 3-bets. But it depends. It depends a lot on like what do we know about our opponent at that point. If our opponent is an unknown reg, I would tend to give credit here. I would tend to give credit here for them, and But then it's also about like pocket kings, pocket aces. I think both of these are going to be too strong hands to be 4-bet here. If you are thinking that our opponent should be folding a ton and he's just testing if we are having a great hand. Since then we can, with our big hands, we can get a lot of value out of his.
Okay.
And like something like nines to jacks, I think those are going to be then easy hands to shove here.
Is 4-bet.
And like with this kind of a pot odds, it's also going to be that if we are having a solid suited hand that we open with, we want to flat that as well, since our pot odds are going to be absolutely great.
Okay.
And Kaleon said in this spot he can 3-bet call a bit wider as they are the smallest stacks. Yeah, but he still shouldn't be overly wide. 3-bet call here. He can be wider than if it would be medium stack against medium stack, but even with smallest stack and smallest stack, since there's so little different, like the stack size is like 2,900 chips for Neo, 3,000 chips for this guy, 3,100 chips for this guy. So every 3 players that are short stack, they are within 200 chips of each other. So I think that this is as close as an equal stack size situation there could be. And this is also, it depends. It depends on what happens. The more credit a reg is going to give for a small 3-bet, and like some regs are giving 0 credit and they're just looking at, okay, I'm getting 24% of pot odds, screw you. Like I'm liking my hand here.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be better for him to 3-bet this when he's in position, so it will be better, as it will remove some hands from your range to flat call this. But I think that still, when it's blind versus blind, you still should flat call decently wide and shove hands that are like, when I now see that it's going to be blind versus blind, we can pretty much shove our pocket pairs, like every pocket pair in this kind of situation.
Okay.
Okay, Kaleon was a bit ahead of us. We haven't even started discussing about this. I don't get it why we are shoving the kings. Could you like open up your thinking a bit more?
Well, because I don't want to have a multi-way pot, and I don't want to have a...
Why you don't want to have a multi-way pot?
Because of sets, and because these kind of players, bad players, call too much of pocket pairs.
If players are calling too much of pocket pairs, how does pocket kings fare against pocket pairs? Smaller pocket pairs.
Well, I get not much value when they don't hit, and I lose everything when they hit a set.
You are still going to have at least backdoor, or you have at least 2 outs to outdraw them even if they hit a set. But pre-flop equities, we are like, if our opponents are having smaller pocket pairs, we are going to have great equity against those. And I think that shoving this is something that you will lose a ton of value for. And I'm not saying that we should flat call this, not at all. But if an opponent raises for 120, then we can 3-bet it to somewhere around 300 and get more calls out of this Il Sidorov guy. And this guy as well.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that shoving here, the mistake is for shoving here that we are overbetting so much. We are like overbetting 5 times the pot here, effectively. And I think that's going to be a big overbet.
Maybe I thought about this wrong. I mean, I always thought that if I'm overbetting this 5 times, it's not much different than if I 3-bet shove in another position, another situation where there is. I mean, I treat the money in the pot just as if in other situations where stacks are shallower, there are blinds in the pot. Like, I mean, that ratio is not so different. Does it make sense?
One difference is on what kind of a ranges we are thinking about our opponents to have here. And what we are thinking about, like it's going to be different for them or different for a general opponent to go for broke when they are having like 15 big blinds left and when they are having 75 big blinds. They are going to go for broke with a widely different range. So I'm thinking in here that going for a smaller 3-bet will exploit this guy a lot. Like we are going to get a lot of calls. So like something like 270, 300 would be 270, 360, both would be nice options here. And I think that re-raising makes a lot of sense, but not re-raise to a shove.
Okay.
I don't even know that would there be like any type of hand that I would like to shove here. Like if we are shoving something, it's going to be something like between pocket eights to pocket jacks that we might want to shove. But pocket kings is going to be, I think it's going to be too strong. We want to get more money in.
Okay.
Okay, this hand number 5, this is a bit different from the previous bubble hand. How my range should look like. This call calls a lot and 3-bets a lot, but with a shove I can put a lot of pressure on him but risk a lot. Is there a way to cheat death here with more min raises or limps, or should I just accept that I run into monster from time to time? Accept the monsters, that's the first one. But if we are having a situation where we are having a 3-bet machine here, we don't want to be min raising our weak hands. Like also, like the point here is that if we open raise pretty much anything from UTG +1, we are at least flat calling this with all of our range practically. I think that are you having a different opinion on this?
Okay, the king's hand again. Okay. Against that raise sizing, no.
Yep. That's a good point from Callan as well. But in here, like, our options against the 3-betting machine here are mainly going to be limp or shove. And whether it's like limp, fold, or shove. Against the only larger stack size, it might make sense to fold as well if he's just calling too much. This is something to, let's hold them resources this. Like, what does our shove range here look like?
20%, I would guess.
Well, it looks like to be 100%, but then it's like 6%. And let's see if we are plotting range versus hand equities, like when we are having the first hands drop out, when something like these 7x type of hands are. Interesting. A random guy doesn't need to be much wider. Like if he's just 2% wider than Nash, he's making our shoves with like Jack 7 off unprofitable.
Mm-hmm.
I think that default is going to be limping here, seeing how he reacts. If he raises limpers with as much vigor as he, or like if he raises limpers with shoves as much as he 3-bets, then going for shove.
Okay.
And yeah, like where I would be pretty pretty happy to open fold is a fishing looking active player. Yeah, that's like open folding or checking out how your opponent plays against limps. And if we are limping, we are pretty much stabbing every pot. And like with the shove, we can put a lot on pressure on our opponents. But our opponent needs to be feeling pressure. Like if we are having an opponent that's a James Bond villain like Jaws that doesn't feel any pain, it doesn't make much sense to threaten him with pain if he doesn't feel any. But then it's going to be a different kind of like if he doesn't feel ICM pressure, then it's going to be no use threatening him with ICM pressure. Of course, this is when we are seeing aces, it's going to feel even worse, but it doesn't matter in here. The aces doesn't matter. The 3-betting range does matter.
Okay.
If we are having a really active guy, what is going to make, like, if we don't have fold equity here, I don't think that going for a 3-bet does make that much sense. I'm thinking that against a guy that just raises a ton, then we are going to take a lot more pots to the flop.
With king 3 off.
With king 3 off. It's like we don't make a mistake in here against the wide range either. But it's going to be, it depends on the opponent on how much they are. And Callions have needed to adjust quite a bit on 888 poker regs when they will happily snap call ace jack next to every spot. Yeah, that's one adjustment to make on 888. But this is like, how do we make money on this spot is, like, first of all, we are going to get great pot odds. We are ahead of our opponent's range, but then it's like what is going to be the spot where our opponent is making most mistakes. And Errol UH, like weak to shove Jack 7 off with almost 20 big blinds, or am I wrong? It depends. If your opponent is a good reg, shoving Jack 7 off there is going to be a good play. since there's practically nothing your opponent can do about it. But on this spot, if we are flat calling, then it's like one pot remaining on the flop, and then we need to go all in on multiple flops. Need to call all in on multiple flops when our opponent bets again for our king high. And it doesn't feel good, but it's something to require to do. And does their strategy and range change when there are players and they are a lot shorter, like me with here with 7-8 adjusted big blinds? I think that the range will change somewhat. But then again, I still think that guys are going to be quite aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Like I'm thinking that a general player that opens way too wide, they are making more mistakes by folding on some flops or check folding some flops, but they are not folding anything if we are shoving it against them pre-flop. And in heads up, it's also like if your opponent knows what he should be, if your opponent knows what he should be 3-bet shoving or 3-bet calling, then it will make a lot of sense to go for. It would make a lot of sense to go for a stop and go, since people are making more mistakes against stop and goes in general than they are making against 3-bets. And we are having quite a nice stack size for a stop and go, but we can't stop and go, of course, in here since we are not the first ones to act. But if we would be in a heads-up situation with the same exact stack size or like 1 big blind less, 2 big blinds less, I think a stop and going will make a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the positions. And this is like, if we flat call this, it's also going to be that we are going to call a lot of the flops that we can't then fold on a lot of flops.
What flops do we fold?
I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Like if I'm thinking on what kind of flops we could fold on, I think like it's going to be ace X or flops that are having multiple of the just lower cards like queen, jack 10, 9, multiple of those. Those are like if there are multiple of those but we are having a straight draw, then we pretty much can't fold. But like if we are having a low carded flop, we are always going for it. Actually, if we are having ace on the board, it's going to be also so random that our opponent would likely shove most of the weaker aces. So if there's an ace on the board, I don't think that we can fold. But it's like, it's probably going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we need to play a king 3 for high showdown value with calling when we are playing against an opponent that plays really widely. It's all about thinking where our opponent will make the greatest mistake with his range. And in general, I think that opponents are making more mistakes if we are taking this on the flop than if we are shoving pre-flop. But against this kind of a guy that's too aggressive, I'm going to think that they are going to bet or shove almost all of their hands on the flop anyway. So that's why we can't be folding too much and we need to play the king 3 even for high card showdown value.
Okay.
Are there still merits in min raising with those stack size versus certain players? How should our range look like versus different player types here? Do we still min raise trap here? What about limp? We do min raise trap here. We do limp here. We do min raise fold here. We do shove here. Like with king deuce off, I think that shoving is pretty self-evident here. I don't think that there is a lot to discuss on that about.
Mm-hmm.
What we can limp here are going to be, like even limping here depends a bit on how aggressive our opponent is. If our opponent is as aggressive as this guy, might be that we don't want to limp that much, but the hands that are like solid hands that we want to see flop with, and some hands that we can play against even if he raises. And then our like min raise, I think that we shouldn't have that much min raise fold against this type of a player here that seems to be really active. So I think our min raise range should be quite value filled. But if we are having an opponent that folds a ton here,
Mm-hmm.
like if we are against Bogdan here, for example,
Yep.
we can min raise a ton of crap here. If we are against someone like Sid here, we can min raise our whole range.
Yeah, he's so steep.
But
what if we don't have much information on a player, like a very low sample size?
then we are thinking about what we are doing against an random player. Like, what's our range to play against a random player here?
Hmm. I mean, we could argue that random players don't play back enough.
They don't play back enough, but then it makes like, what's going to go up in value then?
It's going up in value.
Yeah, like what's going up in value if we are having a player that doesn't play back at us enough, but like if we are having a player that doesn't play back at us enough but doesn't fold a lot, then limping goes up in value. If we are having a player that doesn't play back at us enough and doesn't flat call a lot, then min raising goes up in value. If we are having a player that 3-bets us really widely and flat calls us really widely, then shoving goes up in value.
Okay.
And also min raise calling goes up in value, so then we are playing mostly min raise call range, and then we are playing some shove range. So we are like only inducing and only shoving against players that plays really aggressive back at us.
Okay.
And if we are having a player that plays flat calls a lot, not 3-bets a lot, then it's also like some hands are getting their value up higher, like king deuce off, ace deuce off type of hands. Then we are more apt to shove those, since those don't have any post-flop playability. And our min raise range should be consisting of hands that are having good post-flop playability.
Okay.
Is this enough of a it depends answer for you?
Yeah, I think that covered every possibility.
But it's like, if we are thinking about different opponents, like against Sid or Bogdan, I would probably go for min raises pretty much with the whole range before things change. Then if I'm having something like, I don't have a lot of sample size on this Winter Girl, I would probably go for a min raise with all of my range. I don't. This looks like a random player that is not going to be a good player. And against those kind of players, I think that they don't widen up their range enough when small blind raises against big blind. They don't play enough for pot odds.
Okay.
Excellent point for Caleon again. Like, can't do nothing but thumbs up. Oh, Fox, you are having a fan here on our chat.
Yeah, see German, yes.
Okay. Okay. And Foxcatcher, like, it's not on our end. Like, Twitch doesn't give us the options. Everything from our end confirms to Twitch's standards, but okay. We are having a min raise here. We are shoving. I think that this shove looks really good.
It's pretty close actually. Because of the pre-bubble. But it
I don't
depends how
think
much
that
he opens.
I don't think that it should be that close because it's also like the pre-bubble. The pre-bubble situation. It will also tighten up the range that our opponent can call us with, as we are the other big stack here. Like, we are the player that he needs to play tightest against. But I think like pocket 9s, pocket 7s plus is going to be a solid range here, or solid hand here. And this is like, we can't call that many hands. We don't want to flat call against UTG that much. But I think pocket 9s is actually going to be but it's like high uncertainty of the opponent's range. Yeah, we do have a high uncertainty on the opponent's range. We have high uncertainty on how much opponent folds to a 3-bet. But in these kind of situations, it's going to be that we are mainly playing against an average random player in this kind of a situation. Hand number 9. Here a guy min raising on the bubble with awkward jack size is not sure which direction to adjust. Should I shove my calling range or wider or tighter than my calling range? I think in general you should be shoving about equal amount as your calling range. Like, then we are going to play back at, like, the general tendency would be to min raise with these kind of stack sizes with less hands than they would shove with, or have like, there are going to be enough traps for us to react as well. But I would be shoving pretty much the same amount as we would be calling here.
Okay.
And again, it's a really nasty situation because there would be also like can we do anything else? Can we screw our opponent out of his equity anymore? Like, can we take the pot to the flop, and can we, on the flop, can we screw our opponent out of his equity?
Not an easy task.
Not an easy task from, but like when opponent is looking at like a tight reg, I would then think about and Callion, yeah, like whole range is too much to say. That's a good grasp. Like with the hands that are playing best with the 5 card, as the hands that are going to be the 5 card hands that are going to play best, like ace deuce and pocket deuces, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to be shoving those. Okay, here Kai min raises on bubble with the boards. Okay, I think like pocket deuces is probably a hand that if we have any fold equity, it's going to be better in this situation. Like if our ranges are like the amount of range should be about the same, but what kind of a range it is, that's the different. Like something like pocket deuces, it comes out of the call range pretty quickly, as it never is ahead of like any range. But on the other hand, like pocket deuces would be inside a shove range here if we are thinking that our opponent can ever fold. Like if we can think that our opponent can ever fold, something like pocket deuces that is going to have really static kind of equities even when called against a tight or a wide range, the equities are going to be really close to each other. So then if we are having even slightly folds, the small pocket pair type of hands are going to play a lot better.
Okay.
Actually, I'm going to post something on Foxcatcher. So I'm asking on Foxcatcher if he's still here, like if he's having a problem with the network connection. If he's still here in a moment, so. Okay. For the last hand, typical problem with against a short stack all in an unknown probably fishy player just flatting it. If I look at whole resource calculator and treat both players shovers, I respond with pocket jacks plus here, but not sure what range caller has here and how strong it is. On table I thought that it should be even tighter when he just flat calls instead of shoves. I think this is really similar to the situation we talked earlier on. The more this guy is a random guy, the wider we should go. And the more he's a reg, the tighter we should go. And as I screwed something up before starting this session, so I forgot to commit the configuration. If we could have a 5-minute break and then we can look through 1 or 2 questions still, like having a small extra bit for you.
Okay, fine.
So we'll be back in 5 minutes, and I'm going to kill the stream for a while so I can commit the changes.